Podcast Network Asia.
This episode may include topics, references, or discussions around sexual assault, domestic violence, stalking, physical violence, or subject matters that may be disturbing to some of our listeners. We do acknowledge that this content may be difficult. We also encourage you to care for your safety and well-being.
Shocking, sad, revealing, and deeply researched, 𝗗Murderstories podcast covers the true account of infamous killings and true crime stories from the Philippines.
There's no such thing as questions, just hidden answers. Stay tuned as we revisit the inconceivable crimes that exist.
Some listeners may find the following content of 𝗗Murderstories highly disturbing due to its graphic nature. 𝗗Murderstories does not condone nor promote violence of all sorts.
Viewer discretion is advised.
No secret can remain hidden forever. This specifically applies to government officials involved in criminal activities. Hypothetically speaking, what if a prominent publicist had his hands on a secret about a massive scandal that would contribute to jeopardizing a well-known chief executive's career? How far would you think the chief executive's loyal allies could keep the publicist from exposing them to the public?
On November 22, 2000, Salvador Bubby Dacer, a prominent publicist to politicians, met with then-President Joseph Estrada, who was in the midst of an impeachment trial. The meeting was said to be about patching things up. In context, Dacer was a former PR man of Estrada. But as soon as he left his post, he began criticizing the Estrada administration for alleged corruption. 2 days after meeting Estrada, Dacer and his driver, Emmanuel Corbito, were abducted at an intersection in Makati City. Months later, their bodies were found in a creek in Indang, Cavite, as the entire nation discovered the horrific nature of their deaths, known today as the infamous Dacer-Corbito Double Murder case.
You are listening to the 𝗗Murderstories podcast, and this is the 16th episode of Season 3. We also invite you to follow us on Instagram and join our IG channel to participate in our polls and get our show's latest updates and announcements.
ika-24 ng Nobyembre taong 2000, nagnawalang PR practitioner na si Salvador Bubby Dacer at ang kanyang driver na si Emmanuel Corbito. Ayon sa mga saksi, mga taong nakasuot ng police uniform ang kumuha sa dalawa. March 2001, nakita ang mga sunog na labi ni Dacer at Corbito sa Indang, Cavite. Ito ang tinaguriang Dacer-Corbito Double Murder case.
Salvador Bubby Dacer was a prominent Filipino public figure who was an accomplished public relations practitioner. His driver, Emmanuel Corbito, had worked for Dacer for several years. Dacer's expertise acquainted him with many influential people in Philippine society, including politicians, law enforcement personalities, and corporations. His PR career would reach its peak under the administration of former President Fidel V. Ramos.
Bubby Dacer, who was 63 years old at the time of his disappearance, was no stranger to controversy. Despite close ties with former President Ramos, Dacer still went on to work for a year under the Estrada administration. According to Dacer's daughter, Sabina, Estrada and Dacer had known each other since their younger years, even before Estrada became mayor of San Juan. Estrada is also a wedding sponsor to Dacer's youngest daughter, Ampi Dacer Henson. After his short stint with the Estrada administration, which resulted in a fallout between Dacer and Estrada's allies, Dacer began criticizing Estrada for alleged corruption. Dacer was also accused of lobbying for the impeachment of Estrada at the time, which seemed to have earned the ire of the latter.
According to an ABS-CBN article in 2009 featuring some of Dacer's written letters, Estrada and his men felt betrayed. Dacer claims that the Estrada administration accused him of working with former National Security Advisor 𝗗𝗂𝗍𝗲𝗄𝗃 and former President Fidel Ramos to destabilize the government. Though a common friend, former Caloocan City Congressman Luis Baby 𝗗𝗂𝗂𝗃𝗗𝗏, whose nephew is married to Dacer's youngest daughter, Ampi, tried to reconnect Dacer and Estrada to patch things up. Though Dacer was reluctant to meet, but was heavily insisted by 𝗗𝗂𝗂𝗃, as claimed by Dacer's daughters. 2 days later, as recalled by witnesses, Dacer and his driver, Emmanuel Corbito, were abducted at the intersection of South Superhighway and Zobel Rojas Street at the city boundary of Makati and Manila at noon. According to sources, Dacer was on the way to his office at the Manila Hotel for his appointment with former President Fidel V. Ramos. Dacer left his Parañaque residence with his driver on a white Toyota Revo with license plate WES 294 at 9 a.m. and was last in touch with his secretary at 10:15 a.m. As soon as the public knew about the abduction of Dacer and his driver, news broke out like wildfire, with plenty of people assuming Estrada was behind it all.
On November 28, 2000, 2 days after Dacer and Corbito's abduction, then-President Joseph Estrada addressed and confirmed to the media that he met with Dacer on November 22, claiming that he only had a friendly visit and meeting with him. Estrada also denied the accusations that he was behind Dacer's disappearance. Instead, he requested then-Philippine National Police Chief Panfilo Lacson to exert all efforts in finding Dacer, which became more complicated than it was. In addition, former Caloocan City Congressman Luis 𝗗𝗂𝗃𝗏𝗄, who was responsible for putting the meeting together, told reporters that he requested Dacer to provide assistance to save Estrada's image amid the impeachment trial, to which Dacer made no commitment. On the other hand, an article from Philstar reported that palace insiders saw Dacer carrying a huge bag when he left the Malacañang premises, though it was not revealed what the bag contained.
Since the disappearance of Dacer and his driver, authorities have yet to uncover leads that could help them identify the kidnappers or even determine if the two are still alive. About a week after the abduction, Dacer's Toyota Revo was found on a hill in Maragondon, Cavite. There were no traces of Dacer's personal belongings in the abandoned car, including his cell phone and 2 leather attaché cases where he kept confidential files. Speaking of files, according to Sabina Dacer, office papers from his father's office filled up 4 vans as it was transferred to his house after his disappearance. The media obtained some of Dacer's letters to his close friend, former National Security Advisor 𝗗𝗂𝗍𝗲𝗄𝗃, that might have indicated the people behind his disappearance. Dacer's letters that Almonte showed to the media, which pointed out several high-ranking officials from the Estrada administration, caused a rift between Dacer and the former president, leading to his abrupt departure as PR man of the Estrada administration. In addition, several sources, including former Justice Secretary Raul Gonzalez, claimed that the infamous 1999 BW Resources Corporation stock manipulation and price-fixing scandal may have been the reason behind Dacer's demise. According to Gonzalez, when the BW price-fixing scam broke out, the firm hired Dacer as its PR man to contain the damage and fix the firm's image. Therefore, Dacer would have been in possession of very important documents on the BW scandal that could prove Estrada's participation.
It took almost 4 months for the case to gain significant updates. The government at the time was transitioning to a 𝗗𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗏𝗃-led presidency after Estrada's ouster in January 2001, which might have been one of the reasons why the investigation on the Dacer-Corbito case seemed so sluggish. But as expected, new governments that come right after revolutions are bound to clean house, unraveling sinister acts from the previous administration. They uncovered the notorious Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force, led by Director General 𝗗𝗂𝗲𝗿 under the Estrada administration. In the course of the Dacer-Corbito murder investigation, the authorities have identified more than a dozen suspects, composed of agents from the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force, civilian agents, and rogue officers from the Philippine National Police.
The case caught a major break after the National Bureau of Investigation arrested 𝗗𝗗𝗿𝗗𝗏 and 𝗗𝗔𝗓 Lopez, two farmers from Indang, Cavite, who they also suspected of having been moonlighting in murder-for-hire schemes. Both men admitted to killing Bubby Dacer and his driver Emmanuel Corbito. They also pinpointed 12 others, including the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force Visayas chief, 𝗗𝗂𝗿𝗗𝗍𝗍, tagging him as the mastermind. Based on 𝗗𝗗𝗿𝗗𝗏's affidavit, he was paid 1,000 pesos by his bosses right after the killings on November 24, 2000, and received another 500 pesos on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, the other apprehended suspect, 𝗗𝗔𝗓 Lopez, did not mention in his affidavit that he received money, nor if any of the other accomplices got paid for the murders. But he did corroborate Deloy's list of names involved in the horrific crime. Later on, Viña, the alleged mastermind, implicated Senior Superintendent 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, as well as pinpointing 7 other suspects. Afterward, 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 pinpointed Lacson, claiming that the former PNP chief asked his loyal underlings, Senior Superintendents Michael Rey Aquino and Cesar Mancao, to carry out surveillance operations since 1999 and eventually asked them to murder Dacer in 2001.
𝗗𝗗𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏 and 𝗗𝗔𝗓 Lopez provided detailed testimonies of what happened to Bubby Dacer and Emmanuel Corbito. According to both suspects, 6 Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force agents brought both victims, bound and gagged, to a garage owned by Jimmy's brother, William. Afterward, Jimmy admitted that he gathered wood and discarded car tires as they planned to burn the victims at Barangay 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏 1 in Indang, Cavite, an area known for similar killings. As soon as the victims were brought to the site at around 8 p.m., William Lopez strangled Dacer with a length of wire, while another suspect, Diego de Pedro, strangled Corbito and later doused the lifeless bodies with petrol and set them afire. The suspects, including the agents that brought both victims to the site, stood by to watch and ensure that both victims' bodies were fully burnt.
The investigators confirmed the stories of 𝗗𝗗𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏 and 𝗗𝗔𝗓 Lopez as both suspects guided NBI operatives to the crime scene, where they found charred bones and teeth, which were subsequently turned over to NBI forensic experts for identification. On April 2001, forensic experts from the University of the Philippines identified the charred remains of Bubby Dacer and Emmanuel Corbito from their bones and teeth fragments. After months of trying to figure out the mystery behind Dacer's abduction, the nation's worst nightmare at the time turned into reality. But a major question still remains. Who could have been the mastermind of this sinister act?
This case had its fair share of theories, but most of the investigation revolved around high-ranking officials during the Estrada administration, particularly those involved in the notorious Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Task Force. Those who were implicated in orchestrating the Dacer-Corbito Double Murder were former President Joseph Estrada, former PNP Chief Director General 𝗗𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and his underlings, Senior Superintendents Michael Rey Aquino and Cesar Mancao, Visayas Chief 𝗗𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and Senior Superintendent 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. During the height of the investigation, Aquino, Mancao, and 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 became fugitives. All 3 went to the United States, but eventually, the Philippine government caught them in the coming years. 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was the first one to stir the pot. He already implicated his cohorts in 2001, but managed to flee the country. But in 2008, after he and 𝗗𝗂 got caught in the United States, he went back to the Philippines and turned state witness, admitting that he was the project officer of the Dacer-Corbito Double Murder, and claimed that someone from Malacanang ordered Michael Ray Aquino to kidnap Dacer and recover important documents that were in the victim's possession. The missing documents were supposed to be released during the impeachment trial of Estrada, which appears to be related to the 1999 BW stock manipulation scandal. Furthermore, 𝗗𝗏 also claims that his former boss, Panfilo Lacson, had personal knowledge of the Dacer-Corbito Double Murder. It led the DOJ at the time to charge Lacson with 2 counts of murder, but he was able to leave the country before the prosecutors could bring the charges against him. In a shocking turn of events, 𝗗𝗏 took a 180-degree turn. 𝗗𝗏 claims that the DOJ prosecutors under the 𝗗𝗰𝗲𝗿-𝗲𝗏 administration were forcing him to pin the blame on Lacson, which he later ended up defending. 𝗗𝗏's change of heart led the Court of Appeals to throw out the charges against Lacson, clearing his name in the process. When reporters asked Lacson how he evaded arrest, Lacson asserted that a Supreme Court decision in 2006 allowed individuals with outstanding warrants of arrest to continue with their legal proceedings despite not being in the physical custody of the court.
Mr. Senator, let's talk about when you fled the country because of the Dacer-Corbito case. Ang sabi niyo po, noong po ako ay umalis, wala pa akong warrant of arrest, wala akong violate kasi wala akong whole departure order. Senator, it was perfectly legal, but was it right?
Yeah, it was legal. It was right because that's the option that I took, because nagkataon lang magaling yung aking lawyer at nagkataon lang swerte ko siya yung lawyer noong bagong jurisprudence, because I did not even know that, because before that ang alam kong jurisprudence, pag na-issue ka ng warrant of arrest, kailan magpasailalim ka ng physical custody ng mga say BJMP or PNP, magpasailalim ka ng legal custody ng court. But it changed already. Nagkaroon ng bagong jurisprudence. I think it's 𝗗𝗏 case, na kung saan, even if the accused becomes scarce, pwede mag-file ng mga pleadings, pwede umandar yung kaso. Mas mababa if I took that option. Kaysa naman sa, makita kong ngingiti-ngiti yung mga nagpe-persecute sa akin dahil nakitang nandun ako sa likod ng rehas na bakal.
Needless to say, Lacson had already claimed his innocence and maintained that he was being attacked by his enemies from the Arroyo administration.
On the other hand, Michael Ray Aquino, who many considered him as Lacson's top aide and one of the masterminds of the Dacer-Corbito Double Murder, was arrested in the United States for espionage. Aquino pleaded guilty in 2006 to illegally accepting classified U.S. secret documents as a part of a plot to overthrow former President 𝗗𝗏𝗲𝗏𝗿 administration, and was sentenced to a 76-month prison term, later reduced to time served. In 2011, Aquino was extradited to the Philippines and pleaded not guilty to the double murder charges. Later on, the court ordered the NBI to release Aquino for lack of evidence. Unlike 𝗗𝗏, Aquino stood his ground and maintained his innocence throughout the legal proceedings. Meanwhile, Cesar Mancau's affidavit in 2009 was similar to Glenn 𝗗𝗏's testimony. According to Mancau, Lacson had masterminded the killings. He also said that about a month before the murders, he heard Lacson tell Michael Ray Aquino to have Dacer killed. However, around the same time Lacson's charges were thrown out in 2011, the Court of Appeals ruled that Mancau was an unreliable witness, citing inconsistencies and contradictions in his affidavits. By January 2012, Mancau was removed from the Witness Protection Program and was turned over to the National Bureau of Investigation after the Supreme Court affirmed the Court of Appeals ruling, declaring him unfit to serve as a state witness. The NBI planned to move Mancau to Manila City Jail, but he managed to escape from the NBI's custody before they could transfer him. 𝗗𝗂𝗏 escaped at around 1:40 a.m. on May 2, 2013, and was captured in CCTV footage in the NBI, which also showed two unnamed NBI agents helping him. He also left a note in his cell, asking the NBI not to remove his things from the room without an inventory and saying that he is a victim of injustice. Then DOJ Secretary 𝗗𝗗𝗿 de-Lima told reporters at the time of 𝗗𝗂𝗏's escape that she was in contact with 𝗗𝗂𝗏 and asked him to surrender within the day. But 𝗗𝗂𝗏 replied that he would rather live as a fugitive than risk getting killed in jail. 10 hours after what appeared to be an effortless escape, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 granted phone interviews to TV shows. 𝗗𝗂𝗏 claimed that he escaped because he feared that then-Senator Panfilo Lacson was plotting revenge against him and that he was being improperly treated by the DOJ. Reporters promptly sought Lacson's comment regarding 𝗗𝗂𝗏's escape, to which he responded via text message, quote, "That's his and his custodian's problem right now. Aside from that, I would defer any further comment," unquote.
4 years since 𝗗𝗂𝗏's escape, a manhunt operation has been started, and he has been under the NBI's radar ever since. But being a former police officer, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 was proven to be both evasive and arrogant. Days after his escape, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 took pictures of himself in front of the main offices of the DOJ and NBI, seemingly to taunt the government. Though de-Lima at the time claimed that 𝗗𝗂𝗏 only photoshopped his photos. 𝗗𝗂𝗏 responded and claimed that the photos were true and that he did it to inform the public that he was not leaving the country. In 2015, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 did a 180-degree turn, similar to his former colleague 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗗𝗂𝗏, through a radio interview with DZMM, retracted his previous claims that Lacson and Estrada were the masterminds behind the Dacer-Corbito murders and claimed that he had no choice but to follow the orders of the Arroyo and Aquino administrations to pin the blame on his former bosses. 𝗗𝗂𝗏 also apologized to Lacson and Estrada for tarnishing their reputation.
Ay talaga pong humingi ako ng apology kay Senator Lacson sa nagawa ko po pagsira, pagmalign ng kanyang pangalan, reputasyon, ambisyon, yung kanyang hihirap nung siya pinagtago.
Una nang idinawit ni 𝗗𝗂𝗏 si Senator Panfilo Lacson bilang mastermind sa Dacer-Corbito murder case. Ngayon, inamin niya kung bakit niya nagawa ito.
Dahil po sa takot at banta na aking buhay noon, ako po'y sumunod sa kailang kagustuhan na madawit ko yung mga political opposition na balakid at critical sa administrasyon ng dating Reming Arroyo po.
Humingi rin ng sorry si 𝗗𝗂𝗏 kay dating Pangulong Joseph Estrada na naidawit din niya sa murder case. Gayon din kay Justice Secretary 𝗗𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 de-Lima dahil sa pagtakas niya sa NBI at sa hindi pagsunod sa apela ni de-Lima na siya ay sumuko na. Akusado si 𝗗𝗂𝗏 sa Dacer-Corbito murder case at ililipat na sana sa Manila City Jail nang tumakas mula sa detention center ng NBI dahil sa takot sa kanyang buhay.
Sana po maintindihan din ni Secretary at ako po humingi ng pamanhin, patawad at pangunawa.
In 2017, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 finally surrendered to the authorities and somehow got his charges dropped. In 2019, tried to run for Congress as a party list representative but lost. During the midterm elections, he expressed his support for then-President Rodrigo Duterte. A year later, 𝗗𝗂𝗏 was appointed by the Duterte administration as an executive director of the DICT's Cybercrime Investigation and Coordination Center.
Bubby Dacer and Emmanuel Corbito weren't the only people killed in the course of this case. In January 2003, 𝗗𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, a former chief of the notorious presidential anti-organized crime task force for Visayas, and was initially the alleged mastermind of the double murder, was shot dead inside a counselor's house in Tanza, Cavite, after engaging in a fight with 4 other people during a drinking session. though it appears that this case wasn't related to the ongoing Dacer-Corbito case at the time. In September 2009, Jimmy Lopez, one of the first two suspects who admitted to the Dacer-Corbito murders and implicating several other suspects, including naming Viña as the mastermind, was shot dead and killed together with his female companion by unknown assailants at his residence in Cavite. At the time, Lopez was expected to appear before the DOJ to reaffirm his testimony. So far, there are no updates on this case. In September 2010, Dacer's daughters filed with the U.S. District Court in San Francisco a $50 million civil suit against former President Joseph Estrada, former PNP Chief Panfilo Lacson, former PAGCOR President Reynaldo Tenorio, businessman Dante Tan, and former police officers Michael Ray Aquino, Glenn Dumlao, and Vicente Arnaldo for compensatory and punitive damages for their father's cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment, torture, and extrajudicial killing. Dacer's daughters believe that their father was killed because he can prove the alleged connection between Estrada, PAGCOR, and the Best World Gaming and Entertainment Corporation's insider stock trading scandal. Subsequently, the U.S. court ordered defendant Michael Ray Aquino to pay $4.2 million in punitive damages to Dacer's daughters. According to the court, on November 24, 2000, there is evidence through text messages that Aquino instructed his men to abduct, torture, and kill Dacer. Based on these findings, the Philippine Department of Justice recommended Aquino's indictment for the double murder of Dacer and Corbito, as the testimony claimed that he was obviously stage managing the entire operation by cellular phone. In May 2013, former DOJ Secretary 𝗗𝗲 de Lima cleared former President Joseph Estrada's name in the double murder. According to de Lima, the NBI had looked into the alleged involvement of the former chief executive, but the investigation was futile because no evidence was found that would warrant a preliminary investigation against Estrada. Despite numerous setbacks in the Dacer-Corbito double murder case, the latest update came through in January 2023 when a suspect named William Reed, who was initially part of the first group of people that was charged for the murders of Dacer and Corbito in 2001, was finally arrested in Bulacan. So far, there is no major news yet regarding this horrific case.
It appears that someone or a group of sinister men belonging to the upper echelon of government officials during the Estrada administration truly wanted to silence Dacer to save face. But knowing what happened to Bubby Dacer and Emmanuel Corbito isn't enough to close the double murder case. Getting to know the real mastermind is just as challenging, which, unfortunately, in this case, we may never know. The Dacer-Corbito double murder case has been mired in controversy and allegations of political involvement, cover-ups, and conspiracies. While several suspects have been arrested and charged, the case remains unsolved, leaving more questions than answers.
Thank you for listening to PH Murder Stories.
If you like this episode, give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
You can also support our show on Patreon. Any amount you donate would benefit our team to keep doing what we love, which is to provide more true crime episodes for our listeners. Link in the description.
For further updates from our show, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at PH Murder Stories. And subscribe to our YouTube channel at PH Murder Stories.
The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy and position of Podcast Network Asia, the hosts of the program, or other programs of the network. Any content provided by the people on the podcast are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything.